I'm Valerie Lang. I teach animal law here at the college. I want to thank law enforcement, veterinary professionals, animal control officers, animal law students, Animal Outreach Club people, just interested citizens who are here today. This is the second session. We had one yesterday. I think you'll find it fantastic. It was so informative. I teach animal law. I'm also on the Rensselaer County Animal Protection Coalition. It's designed to assist police in animal cruelty investigation, reporting, recognizing, and investigating it. Through no fault of the police, they are not trained in great depth, and it's a pervasive problem in our society, one that we are very happy to see so many people really interested in. So I'm going to begin by introducing Sue McDonough, one of the, I would say, brainchilds of the Rensselaer County Animal Protection Coalition. I'm going to read Sue's bio. She's very modest, but she's an amazing person, and I just want you to know who's speaking to you right now. Sue McDonough is a 26-year veteran of the New York State Police with extensive experience in criminal animal cruelty investigations. McDonough is a seasoned instructor who has taught at the New York State Police Academy and New York State Humane Association workshops across New York State, consistently called upon by municipal and state police, judges and district attorneys, social workers, SPCAs, and humane societies to offer her expertise in animal cruelty cases. McDonough has also served as president of the New York State Humane Association, where she now serves on the board of directors. Sue has co-authored the NYSHA manual, How to Investigate Animal Cruelty in New York State. From 1986 to 2004, McDonough was employed as an investigator with the New York State Bureau of Criminal Investigation, where she investigated major felony crimes, undercover narcotics, and animal cruelty. Sue is a state and federally licensed wildlife rehabilitator and has worked with veterinarians to rescue and care for thousands of orphaned and injured animals. Sue's awards include the New York State Police Troop G Investigator of the Year, the Animal Protective Foundation Award for her instrumental work in the passage of Buster's Law, the Felony Animal Cruelty Law, the Mohawk and Hudson River Humane Society Award for assisting with animal cruelty investigations, and the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency's Award for outstanding contributions in the field of drug law enforcement. McDonough holds an associate's degree in criminal justice from Hudson Valley Community College. Folks, Sue McDonough.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming here today. As many of you know, and some of you don't know, we investigate animal cruelty under the Agriculture and Market Law, and that would be Article 26. At one time, it was under the penal law, and if you look at some of the old case law, Mudge versus the state, Bunt versus the state of New York, it actually refers to penal law cases. One of them pertains to animals that were kept in a barn. It was cattle, and it was bitter cold. The water was frozen. They had no food or water. And what the judge decided was that the troopers were correct in making an arrest for animal cruelty. And that was like back in 1942. And at some point, it was transferred over to the Agriculture and Market Law. Many people don't realize it, but there is nobody in the Department of Agriculture and Markets who investigates animal cruelty. And actually, even though it's under Agriculture and Markets, it's stated in that law that the police must investigate animal cruelty. Now, there's reasons why we should investigate animal cruelty, and it should be the police. Not only for the sake of the animals, but in recent years, people who have spoken to serial killers have found out that they started out torturing animals. People like Jeffrey Dahmer used to take dogs and chop their heads off and stick them on posts in the backyard. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, would take dogs and put them in orange crates and shoot arrows through them. And the list goes on and on. I could talk about the serial killers all morning. Nobody did anything about it. They all knew this was going on, and they didn't think it was an important enough to investigate. But the FBI has discovered that the triad of being abused as a child, reacting by torturing animals, and becoming violent to humans is a well-established fact. And therefore, it's something that the police must investigate. It includes felony and misdemeanor crimes. We do it for the concern of the animals. It could lead to other criminal activity. And Section 371 of the Agriculture and Markets Law states a police officer must, and any officer of the SPCA may, summon or arrest any person offending against any of the provisions of Article 26. The police in New York State are actually mandated by law to make arrests for this crime. The ASPCA is only in New York City. They don't come out of the city. They are a private organization. The SPCAs in New York State are sanctioned by the ASPCA. They are also private organizations. They don't get any state or federal funding. If we don't support them, they go out of business. They are not mandated by law to investigate animal cruelty. A lot of them don't even have cruelty investigators. Animal control and dog control in New York State are not peace officers. They cannot make arrests for crimes. They can enforce Article 7, which deals with dangerous dogs and unlicensed dogs, but they cannot enforce Article 26. The key is that we all have to work together. The police, if they get a call about an injured dog or starving dogs, they're going to go out there and they're going to be thinking, what am I going to do about this? I can't put them in my car. Who am I going to call? What am I going to do? They have to know that there's somebody there that they can work with. It's just like Child Protective Services. The police don't go out, go into a house, remove the children, and take them home. They call CPS. In Rensselaer County now we have a task force. And the police can call us when they need assistance. They can call the Mohawk and Hudson River Humane Society, and we will give you those numbers. You might have them in your package. If the Humane Society doesn't personally go out, they'll send a member of the coalition. In accordance with the Agriculture and Markets Law, an animal is every living creature except a human being. This law applies to every animal, not just dogs and cats, not just domesticated animals, not just farm animals. The definition of cruelty includes every act, unjustifiable killing, beating, burning, hanging, etc. Every omission, failure to do something that has to be done. Every neglect, whereby unjustifiable physical pain, suffering, or death is caused or permitted. That covers a lot of things because we're talking about all different kinds of animals. There's many different things that can go wrong when you're dealing with every animal out there that you can think of except a human being. So it has to be broad. It can't be specific about every single thing. It's just like endangering the welfare of a child. It doesn't list all the things that we can do to children. But when you say every omission and every neglect whereby unjustifiable suffering is caused or permitted, what we're talking about is what cannot be justified. Now, back in 1997, Buster's Law was passed, which is the felony animal cruelty law, and it applies to any dog or cat, a companion animal, any other domesticated animal that's living in or near the household. It could be a horse. If you have a pet horse that's living near your household and that is your pet, that's a companion animal. It's not necessarily just a dog or cat. A farm animal would be any ungulate, poultry, cattle, sheep, swine, goats, and so on, that are raised for commercial or subsistence purposes. And the reason this is broken down is because Section 353, which is a misdemeanor, applies to any animal, farm animals and companion animals. Overloading, overdriving, injuring or killing any animal, failure to provide food or drink or proper sustenance to any animal, or any neglect. Now, overloading, it used to apply to horses. A lot of these laws are old, 75, 80 years old, and they talked a lot about horses. Now overloading can apply to pit bulls that are being walked through the city of Albany and Troy with concrete blocks fastened to their neck, with 50-pound chains wrapped around their neck, that are being trained for fighting, and this is actually part of the training. Not just horses. It's overloading of any animal. Unjustifiably injuring or killing any animal. We all know what failure to provide proper sustenance is. You don't feed something, you don't give it food and water, it's a misdemeanor, and any omission or neglect. It applies to wild and domesticated animals. We can talk about what is unjustified with a wild animal. Hunting is justified. Hunting is a sport. Animals are usually killed for meat. It's not against the law to go hunting and kill a wild animal for food. This is not justified. Kids that take a wild mallard duck, they tie its bill shut, put nails through it, put nails through its eyes. For fun, these kids need to be checked out. This is something that a police officer should look at. You know, it's a felony to put slugs in a coin machine. It's a felony to forge a $5 check. This here is only a misdemeanor because it's a wild animal, but still, it's a fingerprintable offense. It's not hunting. It cannot be justified. In this particular situation, the guy got upset with his dog, beat it with a newspaper. He didn't cause an extreme injury there, so it was only a misdemeanor, but he did deserve to be arrested. And somebody that loses his temper to that extreme just because the dog pees on the floor, he might need to get help someplace. If we were to just send an animal control officer out there, there really is nothing that they can do. They can't make an arrest. They might go to the police and say, look, this is going on here, and the police are going to say, well, I can't do anything about it, because a lot of them haven't had the training. They don't even know this law exists. But today, you're going to learn. Failure to provide proper sustenance. This horse was seized from a place down in Dutchess County. A woman split up with her husband, left her horse behind. He let it starve to death, just about, pretty close. It was rescued by the police down there in the Dutchess County SPCA. Animal cruelty is something that cannot be permitted. You don't have to be the owner of the animal. In this case, both people were arrested, the owner and the person who was left with this animal. They said, well, it's 20 years old, it's losing weight, it's an old horse. This was 2 months later, after it was taken away and actually put in my barn. I rescue horses sometimes if they're from out of the area, not locally. So you can see the difference in 2 months. A lot of times, all an animal needs is to be fed. And it's amazing how how well they do when you give them food. Now, this was a situation down in Ravenna. Failure to provide proper sustenance. These horses kept getting out. You can see the enclosure here. It's tied together with baling twine. All around them was nothing but a swamp, mud, just trees. There was nothing for them to eat. So when that happens, horses are going to get out. Neighbors are going to call. Most of the cases that you work on, you will hear about from neighbors. People are going to see this going on. They're going to be concerned. They're going to call the police. They're going to show up and say, what the hell am I going to do with 6 horses? So they're going to call somebody for help. And they can actually call anybody. The police can seize animals and put them in a safe place. It doesn't matter where they put them, as long as it's a safe place. In this case, they called the Mohawk and Hudson River Humane Society, and we went out. We got some people together to help us with vans, and we ended up moving these horses because they were getting out in the street. They weren't being fed. Some of them were in worse condition than others. You can see the fence line there. When we go to these things, we have to look around. You look at the property. You look at the way the animals are being contained. There was no shelter for them. The only hay was hay that we brought there just so that we could keep them in one spot. This horse here had a very bad case of rain rot. Animals need shelter. All animals need some kind of shelter. Wild animals, you won't see them standing out in an ice storm. They'll get into holes in the ground. They'll go into holes in the trees. They'll go under heavy brush. A horse, a domesticated horse, especially a thin-skinned thoroughbred that's locked in a place like this, can't get out of the elements. They're going to start getting sick. They're going to start getting diseases. They have to have a structure just so they can get out of the elements. It doesn't have to be a heated barn, just a running shed. That's sufficient for them. Whenever we seize animals, if there's more than one animal, they have to be identified. This is horse number 1. We have the assistant director of the Mohawk and Hudson River Humane Society there, handling the horse. She's a horse expert. And every one of them has to have a number. We would bring a vet to a situation where we're going to seize animals. A vet would make a statement about every individual animal, and that would be included on an information that the police were to write up for animal cruelty. Every animal is a separate information, a separate count of animal cruelty. Now, horses typically do not keep a halter on all the time. This shows the condition of this horse and the rain rot that it had. It's still horse number 1. And just to show you, this was horse number 2. In case the halter comes off, we have to identify it somehow. With dogs, we put collars on them with their numbers, and they are retained on the dog. Halters come off and on, so we put a spray painted horse number 2. Every animal with horses is identified, usually that way. Any omission or neglect could be leaving a dog in a hot car. That could be a misdemeanor or a felony, depend on how and why it's done. If you have some little old lady who's in the beauty parlor, she brings her dog there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it's only at that time maybe 70 degrees, and after 2 hours it goes up to 85, and the dog is in the car. Or somebody goes to a shopping mall, leaves their dog in the car. That might be a misdemeanor because it really wasn't done intentionally to cause suffering to the animal. However, we have had situations, there was one in East Greenbush a few years ago where a child put his mother's dog in the car, teenage boy, because he was upset with her for some reason. It was a very hot day in July, and the dog crawled under the seat and died. And in a case like that, it was done intentionally. It was done in an especially depraved manner, and it was a felony. Overgrown hooves on horses resulting in suffering, collars embedded into the necks of dogs. These are things that you see when you go out on cases of domestic violence or whatever. A lot of times, the police just walk by and they think, well, there's nothing wrong here, because they don't realize that cruelty is any act, omission, or neglect, lack of vet care resulting in suffering. I don't know if any of you heard the news, but there was a case up in Granville where several dogs were rescued. They had very bad skin infections. On one, I think they combed off like 20 pounds of hair and feces. And in a case like that, these animals were severely neglected. It's not just that they need food and water. This was a donkey that was rescued from Salem a couple months ago. Horses need their hooves trimmed. If they don't get them trimmed, it's very painful for them. It actually affects their entire leg. They can have serious problems with their tendons as a result of this. In the wild, when horses run, they wear their feet down. In a situation like this where they're confined, they're just going to keep growing and growing. They have to be trimmed about every 8 or 12 weeks. And if they're not, then it's a sign of its neglect. Usually when you see animals that are starving, you will see overgrown hooves. They're not going to pay for a farrier. They're not going to pay for the food. You will see all of these things. And if any of you have any questions while I'm talking, just stop me. Otherwise, I'll just keep going here. Collars embedded into the necks of dogs. This was a case that one of the troopers went on up in Clifton Park a couple months ago, and while she was there, she happened to notice the blood coming off of this dog's neck in the backyard. These people said they brought the dog in the house every night. They never even noticed this. They had this collar on this dog since it was a puppy, and they left it this way. Obviously, they weren't bringing it in. They weren't taking care of it. It was all matted. It was filthy. And this was a case of neglect. And in addition to making an arrest for the domestic violence case, she arrested them for animal cruelty. Let's see, situations that need to lead to neglect. Ignorance, puppy mills, and animal hoarders are some of them. This is a case of ignorance. This is up in Hoosick Falls. I went there a couple years ago with the Mohawk and Hudson River Humane Society after the neighbors were complaining that this woman wasn't feeding this pony that she bought for her daughter. She actually had it tied out on the back lawn, and she thought it could just eat the grass down, and that was sufficient. It was slowly starving to death. She would go out and comb its forelock. That's its forelock, and she'd cut it with scissors and trim it. She had that halter on it, which would probably fit on a draft horse. She had no idea that the pony just couldn't eat grass. And she knew it kept losing weight, but she didn't know why. And she ended up just signing it over to the Mohawk and Hudson River Humane Society. Puppy mills are a big problem, and they're moving into New York State more and more, especially out to the western part of the state. And this is where a lot of the dogs that end up in pet stores are coming from. And people are paying thousands of dollars for these dogs. They're being bred in puppy mills in cages like this, stacked on top of each other, in filthy, dirty conditions, cold barns. The female dogs are bred constantly for their entire lifetime. And a lot of times when they will no longer reproduce, they just take them out and shoot them. And there's a bill right now in New York State that's trying to make these people who breed these dogs to give them farm status so they can write this off as a farm exemption. And the humane organizations are fighting this. Animal hoarders are another big problem. And the definition of an animal hoarder is a person who amasses more animals than he or she can properly care for. Just because somebody has a lot of animals doesn't mean they love animals. It just means they have a lot of animals. These individuals generally they fail or refuse to acknowledge that there's a problem. I have gone to places where there have been dead horses lying on the ground, starving animals, and these people have said to me, well, if you didn't come here today, these horses would have been fed. They would have been okay. They will not give up any of these animals. They will let them live in the most deplorable conditions. They will go to shelters where they think animals might get put to sleep, take them home and stack them in cages like this, have them urinating all over each other. As long as they're alive, they don't have any concern for quality of life. And I know today you hear a lot about these no-kill shelters. We're no-kill. The animals here are not going to be put to sleep. Well, then what happens to them? If you only have cages for 50 dogs and 30 cats, and you get them in, and they're not adoptable, what are they going to do, live in a cage their entire life? And then they get full, and then they start turning animals away. And if you live in an area where there's a no-kill shelter, they get turned away. Where are they going to end up? On the street. Euthanasia is very sad, but it's not cruel. Leaving them in situations like this is cruel. Turning them away is cruel. Animal hoarders usually create a fire hazard. They have animals stacked in cages. You will find garbage all over the place. This woman was actually living in this place. This was her washing machine, covered with cockroaches. She was worried about the mice in that place, so she set a mouse trap. There's actually a dead mouse in there, part of it, but the cockroaches didn't seem to bother her at all. Her bathroom wasn't working. You just cannot believe how bad this was until you went into this place and actually smelled it. The smell is something that we cannot bring into the courtroom. But this was her bathroom. The electrician that she called upon to come and fix her furnace went there, and he actually went in the place, saw the cockroaches crawling all over turned around, walked out, and came to the state police station and said, you've got to do something up there. This is a very bad situation. And she had many animals in there, and we ended up going up and seizing them all. And animals may be seized if for more than 12 successive hours they've been kept in crowded or unhealthy conditions. That's under Section 373, Subdivision 2. And that is in your package. I gave everybody copies of search warrants, which the district attorney will talk about. Something to use as an example. I have found that the police like to have examples because this is something that they're not familiar with. Some officers might go through their entire career and maybe only handle 1 or 2 animal cruelty cases. It's not something they work with every day. And so they really need copies of search warrants and informations to use as examples. They may be seized if they're not properly cared for or without necessary sustenance, food, or drink, provided that a search warrant is issued. The assistant district attorney will talk about when a search warrant must be issued and when you have exigent circumstances to remove the animals. Section 353A, aggravated cruelty to animals, is actually Buster's Law. And thanks to Assemblyman Tedisco from Schenectady, that was passed. He pushed that very hard. And it actually protects companion animals. And and it applies to anybody who intentionally kills or injures a companion animal, or intentionally causes extreme pain, or it is done in an especially depraved or sadistic manner. Cats sacrificed and hung. We are free to practice our religion in this country, but not if it pertains to breaking the laws of the state. And the laws in New York State say that we cannot torture animals. Satanic worship is something that cannot be done if animals are going to be tortured. People like to kill cats, some people. Some people have an extreme hatred for cats. Cats are asocial. They are not pack animals. The dogs and cats that we have domesticated came from wild animals. The cats that we domesticated came from cats that stalk alone. The only pack animal in the cat family is the lion. We did not domesticate our cats from lions. Cats in the wild, the bobcats, hunt alone. They don't roam in packs, so they don't think of you as a pack. And when you call them, they might not even understand why you're calling them or why they should come to you. Where a dog is a pack animal, all dogs came from wolves. And wolves are a pack animal. Dogs think of us as their alpha, their leader of the pack. And that's why they want to be with us and they want to please us. This was a dog that was set on fire in July down in Long Island. It was chained to a tree in Brentwood, Long Island, and set on fire. His name was Maximus. The owner was located because the SPCA and the police in Long Island got together and they managed to get up a $20,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the person who did this to this dog. And when they found out who it was, Derek Fanad, they went to his house and they found another dog that was living in extremely deplorable conditions. Anybody that would do this to an animal would do it to a human being. Would injure a person. They might not set them on fire, but they're not a nice person. They deserve to be arrested, and we need to keep track of these people. Let's see. Now, Section 353B, that law passed a couple of years ago, and it applies to shelter for dogs. And it applies to the shelter itself, the weather conditions, and the physical condition or breed of the dog. Obviously, if you have a Siberian Husky, the shelter needs for that dog are not going to be the same as somebody that has a Chihuahua. Beginning 72 hours after a charge of violating this section, each day the defendant fails to correct the deficiencies in the dog shelter, it should constitute a separate offense. So if the police go there and say, look, I want you to get a dog house for this dog, it can't be on a chain outside without shelter. They go back the next day, the dog is on the chain outside, there's no shelter. Their neighbors are saying, this dog has no shelter. It's out here 24/7. It's barking all the time. Every time the police go there, it's a separate offense. Personally, I don't like to see dogs on chains in the backyard. A dog is a pack animal. They want to be with us. They're part of the family. My dogs go in every room I'm in. If I walk in the kitchen, they're in the kitchen. If I'm in the bedroom, they're in the bedroom. They want to be with me. That's what dogs were bred to do, be our companions. But anyway, the law doesn't say they have to be with us, but they do have to have appropriate shelter. This is a situation that occurred up in Berlin, Rensselaer County. This person was raising German Shepherds, breeding them, selling their puppies. He had 48 German Shepherds, and this was pretty much the shelter that most of them had. You could see this dog on the chain. He was terrified of people. He would be what we call a fear biter. He would get away from us until he got to the point where there was no place for him to go, and then he would lunge at us because he was never socialized, lived on a chain. This was his dog house. Obviously, it wasn't sufficient. It was filled with filth. This guy would actually go along a street and pick up roadkill animals. This is a dead rabbit, and that's what he would throw down for the animals for food. And that was his water. So when you go to these things, you got to take pictures not only of the animals, but of the situation that the animals are living in. And obviously, this is just an example of something that would not be appropriate shelter. Animal fighting is a big problem, not just in New York State, but around the country. And it applies to fights with any animals, whether it's bulls and bears, cockfighting or dog fighting, hogs and dogs. It's all animal fighting, and animal fighting is a felony in New York State, whether it's done on the street for amusement, two guys in an alley with their dogs street fighting, whether they're betting on it or not, and it pertains to breeding, selling, or offering to sell animals with the intent that they be fought, permitting fighting on a premises, an abandoned building. Somebody says, go ahead, have your dog fight here, someplace in the city of Albany. Owning or possessing an animal with the intent that it be fought is a misdemeanor, and being a spectator at a fight is also a misdemeanor. Most of the time, we only see animals that have been trained and are being trained for fighting. We're not going to actually see a dog fight. It's very difficult to get into these things, may require undercover operations, often discovered through underground fighting magazines. Drug informants sometimes will give us information about dog fighting. A lot of times it's called in by neighbors. I've worked on a couple situations in New York State where the neighbors actually called in the fact that in one place in Washington County, the guy was hanging dogs. This was in Washington County. He would routinely hang these dogs off of spring poles right in the front yard, right near a school. He had them fastened to a tree. Police drove by every day, didn't even know what was going on. It was actually the neighbors that called and said, you know, these are pit bulls. It's near a school. We don't know why this guy is doing this. And I went up there and did some checking around and did some investigating. One of the guys I used to work with in East Greenbush, Johnny Couch, he looks like a Hell's Angel. I sent him up there. I said, John, ask them if they want to sell any of those dogs up there. So he did. He went up, knocked on the door. This was back when they didn't think anybody knew about dog fighting. These guys actually had ties to North Carolina. And they let John Couch in. They actually let him watch a dog fight, a roll, they called it, a practice fight, so he could pick the toughest dog that he wanted. And we ended up getting a search warrant. Every dog is bred to do certain things. Dogs were bred from wolves, and some of them are bred to hunt. Their ears will go down so that they can pick up a scent. It forces them to use their nose more. Some of them are long, have short legs, so they will go in holes in the ground. Other ones were bred for protection. Pit bulls were bred to fight. They used to fight them in the South a lot. For many years this went on. That's where they were bred for fighting. And they possess what is known as animal aggression. A lot of people that have pit bulls, if there's no pets in the family, they're fine. You might get them around another dog. They might get loose, start running through the neighborhood, and attack an animal. That's what they were bred to do. They don't have to be trained to do this. I'm not saying that all of them will do it, but there's really no way to know. For example, this was a place down in Orange County. This guy probably built his house on dog fighting proceeds. He was the publisher of this magazine, the Sporting Dog Journal, which you can look at on your break, which is an undercover dog fighting magazine. You won't see these next to Better Homes and Gardens, the magazine rack. And I subscribed to this under the name of Cliff Johnson for many years, these dog fighting magazines. And there's a notice in this one I got from 2001, please take note, our address has changed from Jefferson, Georgia to Unionville, New York, P.O. Box 359. So I called the troopers down there and I said, why don't you find out who has that post office box? And they did. And after a lot of investigations and looking through these magazines, we managed to get enough information to get a search warrant, to go to this place. This was what was in his backyard. These pit bulls, usually all of these yards are the same. They have a stockade fence around the place. They're all on very heavy chains. And the bloodlines of these dogs are like bloodlines of very famous thoroughbred racehorses. Chinaman, Rapid Roy, the red-nosed breeds. If you look through these magazines, you'll see certain bloodlines over and over again. And you know that these are the champion fighters, grand champion fighters. A champion fighting dog means that he won 3 fights. Anybody that's involved in dog fighting knows this. A grand champion is a dog that has won 5 fights. A lot of his dogs were champions and grand champion fighters. Every animal is identified. The scars are noted. With dogs, we put a collar on their neck. This would be dog number 13. The veterinarian would write notes, dog number 13, this is what I found that is wrong. This one here was one of his top fighting dogs, Coupe de Ville. He actually had a trophy in his house for winning the Killer Clown show. All of these dog fights are listed as show news. It's actually fight reports, and they will list them in these magazines. He actually had 64,000 subscribers around the country. $40 a year for a subscription, 64,000 subscribers. And he was selling fighting dogs. He had guns in the house and drugs in the house. We went to Washington County. There were illegal drugs in the house. We went to Schenectady County. There were illegal drugs in the house, OxyContin and marijuana, while we were conducting a dogfighting investigation. This is actually a spring pole that was hanging in the yard that the dogs would jump up on, grab on by their teeth, and hang on for maybe an hour at a time every day. 3 weeks before a dog fight, this is how they get them ready. They call it their keep. They'll make them hang on a spring pole. They'll make them run on a treadmill. They'll start injecting them with vitamins. Lately, when you look through these fighting magazines and you notice some of the bloodlines of these dogs, this is just New York State, their ads. Pitt Island Kennels, inbred champion, Mystic Red Boy dogs. So they're inbred, they're champion fighting dogs, and they're being sold in Mount Marion, New York. None of these people will give you their address. They have cell phone numbers. They don't want you to know where they live because they don't know now who's watching them anymore. Roll Hard Kennels. To roll is to get a dog ready for a fight. It's to show just how tough they are if they will be fighting dogs. Grand Champion Lou Kane. Grand Champion means he won 5 fights, bred to an inbred gringo bitch, and that's the phone number. Anybody who wants to fight dogs would want one of these dogs because they're inbred. They're bred from champion fighting lines. They're probably very tenacious. This is what is ending up in our animal shelters. And as you saw, I was holding these dogs. They were fine with me. As soon as I got them next to another animal, they went crazy. That's what we have out there. Bad Company Kennels, 10 different inbred offsprings of Bass, Tramp, Red Boy. Any of the Red Boy breeds are known dogs, fighting dogs. This is some of the paraphernalia. This is a collar that was taken off a dog. The guy happened to take a hammer, the hammerhead, and fasten it on the collar, put weight around his neck. These are breaking sticks. They will go in the pit when the dogs are fighting. They will not attack their owner. What? Yes?
I was just curious, what happened to the 3 kennels that you just mentioned, and then the one in Orange County that you infiltrated?
That was James Friccione. Went to jail for 4.5 to 7 years. Went to trial. The case in Schenectady with Thomas Provincia, he also went to jail. The one in Washington County, I think he got probation and a conditional discharge. This is an electrocution device. When these dogs lose a fight, they're electrocuted. They get hung, they get set on fire, they are a disgrace to their owner. A lot of times that's what happens. We have found pit bulls in Albany, wrapped in a carpet with gasoline poured on them, set on fire. Probably losers of a dog fight. More evidence, that's a treadmill. The red in there is actually the blood from the dog's paws. They will make them run until their paws bleed. If you look through these fighting magazines, you'll see drugs, things to put on dogs' feet to protect them so that their feet don't bleed. That's a spring pole. The guy took the kid's bedroom and made a little room out of it to train his pit bulls in. And this is just dog fighting magazines, chains to hang them with, and drugs that were seized out of one of the houses that we went into. Another dog fighting yard, again, a stockade fence around the place. A lot of these guys like to cut their dogs' ears off so that they don't bleed during a dog fight. Dogs have a lot of veins going through their ears. Their ears are very sensitive. It's a misdemeanor for a person to crop a dog's ears. It must be done by a veterinarian, and they must use anesthesia. Okay. You'll find missing ears, eyes, bite marks, ears often chopped off. Street fighting occurs in playgrounds, on the streets, in alleys. The owners will state that it was an accident. Usually with street fights, or sometimes they use other dogs other than pit bulls, and they'll use pit bull mixes. With cockfighting, they will take roosters, cut their spurs off. They have a natural spur, and these are the spurs that they will replace the natural spur with. They're razor sharp, and it pretty much applies to the same thing that pertains to dog fighting, the same laws. It's a felony to breed them and to fight them. And this goes on in the rural areas, now more in the inner cities. And the spurs are fastened on. They're thrown into a pit. It's done for gambling purposes. And usually with roosters, a lot of times they'll have one fight and that's it. They don't get to too many fights. They get slashed up pretty bad. With abandonment of an animal, it doesn't matter if the animal was thrown out of a car into the street or left in a house or an apartment. Abandonment is abandonment, and it's a misdemeanor. And if the animal was left there for several days, you would have failure to provide proper sustenance. This was a cat that was abandoned down in Ulster County. We assume it was tossed out of a car. It was out for several days on the street. Probably got in fights with other cats. There were a lot of cats running around down there. It showed up fortunately on the deck of somebody who happens to care about cats and took this picture, took it to a veterinarian. And this is what happens to cats that are thrown out there. Cats that are abandoned, cats that are left out there to fend for themselves. They're domesticated animals. They're companion animals. We fought for years to have dogs and cats made companion animals, to recognize that they need to be protected, that they need food and shelter. I see more and more people taking cats and just dumping them in different places, forcing them to try to fend for themselves, thinking this is kind because they're living, instead of taking them to a shelter. This is no way for a cat to have to survive. Selling diseased animals. Any person who sells, offers to sell, uses, or exposes any animal having any disease that's contagious to other animals or humans is guilty of a misdemeanor. And this is all in Article 26. It applies to pet stores, breeders, private individuals. And we're finding out lately that animals are being bought and sold that have diseases that might be not done intentionally. But I've gotten calls from people who have purchased dogs from breeders. The dog is very sick. They have parvovirus. They might try to get their money back. They might try to get this breeder to pay for the vet bill, and they refuse. In a case like that, they could be arrested under this section. And we're finding out that there's more animals now that have diseases that are being spread to humans, the bird flu and so on. And so this is an important section, that animals are not being sold that have contagious or infectious diseases. That's not to say that occasionally the animal shelters might come out with an outbreak of parvovirus or something. Animal shelters in New York State, as I said, are private organizations. They don't get any state or federal funding. They do the best they can. Some of the shelters never refuse animals. They might take in a sick animal, and a disease like parvovirus could spread through a shelter like wildfire. And in a case like that, they do the best they can. They're not in business to be selling dogs for a profit. Okay, we already talked about the seizure of animals. Who may assist with a seizure? Other police agencies, humane organizations, veterinarians, private individuals, such as the task force, the Humane Society. If there's an SPCA, like we have for Albany and Rensselaer County, the SPCA actually, along with the district attorney's office, plays a major role in what happens as far as protecting the animals in Rensselaer County and Albany County also. But they actually oversee the task force, and we work together. They are a part of our task force. And we all are here to work with the police and make things safer for the animals. And during the seizure, the entire scene must be photographed. Every animal must be photographed. Every animal must be identified with a number and a separate information or complaint must be written for every animal. Obviously, if there's 140 dogs, we might not need to write an information for every one of them. In a case like that, I would call the district attorney's office before I started doing anything. Let them know I'm getting a search warrant. Let them know I'm going to be seizing animals. And ask them what their opinion is. If there's 40 sick dogs, do they just want an information for every one of them? Even though we can, by law, seize every animal that's in the place. And when a person is arrested at the time of arrest, the police can put animals in a safe place. If the person is being arrested for animal cruelty, the SPCA should be contacted. They should be involved in the seizure, and the animals would be cared for under the auspices of the SPCA. Sometimes we can't remove all the animals from an existing location. If we have 60 horses and we only have room for 20 of them in different places, we can get a court order to go back and visit the property and check on the condition of the animals. If at that time we think some of them have to be moved or we have additional places to put them, then we would have to obtain another search warrant. There is a copy of a court order in your package that you can use as an example. Other laws that pertain to animal cruelty would be sexual misconduct under the penal law. And also, animals are considered property. They have a value. So if you have a $100,000 racehorse that gets its legs broken, even though it's not a felony under Buster's law, there is a section, and it's in your, it's under Article 26, that it's a felony to tamper with any animal that's used for exhibition or skill. It would also be a felony under the penal law because it's damage to property. Animals are property. Larceny would also be a crime under the penal law. A dog gets stolen out of a yard. Dogs are sometimes stolen out of yards and used for bait for dog fighting. In addition to animal cruelty, you would have larceny of the animal. Okay, are there any questions? Okay, in your package, you have samples of search warrants, which the ADA will cover with you, and there's a copy of the law. And
Why don't we take a 10, 15-minute break?
right, we'll take a break
Refresh
now.
yourselves.
Thank you very much.
Coffee, bagels.